Hello, welcome back to Trinice's Corner. This is Trinice, and if this is your first time visited my channel, welcome. If you're a returning guest, welcome back, my friend. I am so excited to see you, and I cannot wait to interact with you. I do respond to every single comment. Frankly, I think all your comments are extremely important. They really help to guide and direct some of the messaging and the content on this YouTube channel. So if you've got any questions whatsoever, or even a discussion topic that you are just so excited about and you really want to know more about it, especially if it's in the realm of DEI or anything around that, please comment below and I'm happy to either get in a dialogue with you and go from there. So I love seeing your comments. So definitely get those comments going. And if you are a returning guest, thank you so much for coming back. Yes, I see you. I see you. All right, with that said, if you've been following my YouTube channel, you know that I've started a new topic, and that is around poorly developed and designed ERGs, employee resource groups within organizations. As promised, today I want to focus on, well, correcting those things, or maybe even starting on the right footing in the first place. So today we're going to focus on primarily three topics. And the first is centered around leadership accountability strategies, building that in from the jump. So when I say leadership accountability strategies, I'm really talking about specifically senior executive leadership, especially the CEO. The CEO taking on the ownership of DE&I within their organization. Now, ERGs as a part of that, this is where the CEO really needs to step up 100%. Every employee's eyes is on these individuals, their intent, their output, how it relates to ERGs, the success, their involvement, whether initially or long-term, what they say about it, how they respond to it, the feedback, how feedback is collected, how this person is engaged within ERG groups or DE&I in general. All eyes is going to be on these individuals, and of course their underling, and their own underling is going to be the executive body. So all eyes will be on the C-suite, and the success and failure of ERG is directly tied to the involvement of the C-suite, primarily the CEO. Every time, without exception. With that said, what should the accountability structure look like within a successful ERG? Well, for one, it should start on the right leg. Similar to the first ERG that was created through Xerox, the CEO, Joseph Wilson of Xerox at the time, the first ERG was created in 1970, thereabout. And it was once, like I said before, it was in response to the racial unrest that was happening all throughout the 60s and even well before that, obviously. But through the leadership of the CEO, this was a response to the organization to create safe spaces and an outlet, a networking group for their Black employees at the time, because that's where the primary unrest was happening. And based on this response, this is what sparked the very first ERG group. As ERGs have developed, we know that many do not develop with noble intention. It really is just to shut up most of the employees from griping. Oh, that sounds so harsh. Let's say it differently. So that many ERGs develop under the premise of a response to employees' comments and suggestions through maybe even various surveys. Oh, that was way better. Yeah, we'll go with that. Now, contrary to popular belief that a successful ERG alignment with executive leadership should be tied with monetary outcomes. So in layman's term, the executive leadership's bonuses should be tied to the success of any DEI goals and metrics. I'm not a big proponent of that method at all. I think those numbers are easily manipulated and can be modified to suit any outcome that you're looking for. And there's always an excuse to be made. Not to mention, from a psychological perspective, individuals look at that as a task that needs to be checked off. There is really no emotional attachment to the individuals that are a part of the ERG groups, or the Black and brown employees, or individuals who are on the spectrum, or LGBTQIA community, or any specific groups that the ERGs or D&I is trying to help in the first place. There's a detachment. It's seen as just one more task, and the executive leadership or leadership in general really are not vested in the success of these individuals within these groups. So with that said, I think there are two things that, when aligned, will spark success when you have leadership accountability alignment to ERGs, for example. The one is you've got to align every single leader to, of course, an ERG. Now, that's common practice. In addition to that, the CEO has to kick it off. That person has got to be the very first person. And I mean, this person has to be aligned to every single ERGs, not just one. They've got to ensure that they are present. Please don't get me wrong. The CEO does not have time to be present on every single call or every single meeting. That's impractical. The person needs to run the company. The CEO has to be involved and show a relevant presence within every single ERG. What does that look like? It may look like a town hall of all the ERG meetings, or maybe collectively pulling together all ERG members together as a whole, and having the CEO just address those individuals on a quarterly event. If you can do monthly, great, go for it. But I say a quarterly event. And this is just for the ERG members. This is a perfect time for the CEO to solicit feedback, true feedback, have discussions around the long-term strategy. Now, it is really important that the CEO puts structures in place in order to prevent this from being a gripe session and thus become ineffective. And the best way to do this is honestly to field questions through the ERG leadership team. Ensure that they have those questions, and then at least you know what to table for maybe a smaller discussion. And also the CEO knows which ERGs to drop in to have more intimate sessions with, or intimate and private sessions, problem solve. So let's ensure that there are structures around everything that we do. This is the best way to scale and have a successful impact on all the ERGs, right? The CEO is leading the charge. What happens after that? The executive team then will share the burden of ensuring that they are aligned to all the ERGs that's created, which means it's got to be a strategic and intentional. Don't just create an ERG just because your competitors have 1,001 ERGs and you need to avoid social shaming. Let's be intentional about this, right? There's a lot of work that goes into ERGs, its creation and its success within the organization. If it fails, it will blow up in your face. So you want to ensure that there is a lot of intention and resources that's provided with every single ERG that's created. In addition to that, if you want your ERGs to be successful, have cross-pollination in two ways. And we'll talk about the second way when we start talking about the structure. But the first way is when you have ERG leaders or chairs or their co-chairs, however the structure is, along with the executive representative, that body of individuals come together and honestly have very frank discussions of the directions, the shortfalls, the outcomes, the ideal all the feedback that's been coming that maybe the ERG chairs have been hearing, those honest feedback. Really ensure that you've got a very frank and honest dialogue regularly with this body of leaders, both, of course, the executive leaders and the ERG chairs and co-chairs. There are two elements that make for a very successful leadership accountability structure: executive mentorship and sponsorship that is tied to succession planning. I want to create a distinction. This is not your normal sponsorship or mentorship program within the organization. This is isolated to your ERGs. Now, there is a two-prong approach. The first is that your executive leaders will mentor and sponsor, starting with the chairs and the co-chairs of every single ERG, not with the members. The first layer of sponsorship and mentorship has to start with your individuals that the most of the burden lies. So that's where you start with the co-chairs and of course the chairs for each ERG. Now, when I say mentorship and sponsorship, the two are different. And in another video, I'll cover the differences between mentorship and sponsorship because I do get a lot of questions about this. The two are very, very different. The understanding of the differences will honestly lead to the success or failure of either one. So this forces the organization to really have a plan for their diverse employees within their ERG groups. Aligning the mentorship and sponsorship to the succession planning will help to drive that home. Now, the goal here is not only to demonstrate that you've got a plan for these individuals that's driving your ERG groups, but it's also to send a message. And it's sending a message not just to individuals within the ERG groups, but you're sending a message to your employee base. And you're telling them that, guess what? We have a plan that involves mentoring, upskilling, and reskilling where appropriate for our ERG members, for our Black and Brown employees, for our employees that identify within the LGBTQIA community, for employees with disability, for all of our employees who we across the board. So it's sending a very clear message to these individuals. Now, why do I say you start at the leadership base? Well, that's for obvious reasons. Once the structure is proven successful and you have individuals within the leadership of the ERGs that you've successfully mentored and sponsored, and they, of course, continue their career within the organization, what you'll need to do is to ensure, as a part of the structure, that these individuals are also mentors and sponsors as well. Ensuring that that cyclical process is continued, it will demonstrate two things within the employee base. One, my company has created a place for me within that leadership structure. And two, I know this ERG is successful because guess what? Members within the ERGs are actually moving up the career ladder. This is successful. It demonstrates that the organization is not just trying to create a safe space for me within the confines of the ERG, but they're also creating space for me within the organization and possibly even the leadership team. So it sends a very clear message and ricochets amongst your entire employee base. So that's the second element that will really ensure that you've got leadership accountability across the board. The second topic that I want to address is, what does the ideal ERG structure and outcome look like? Now, let's face it. When we talk about a successful ERG structure and outcome, organizations usually look to measurable guides, and some of these measurable guides are going to be employee engagement surveys, maybe ERG in attendance records. Maybe it's going to be the ERG's output. So for example, what events did they attend? What events did they create? How many employees attended that? You do a couple surveys per year and you get some employee feedback based on their experiences. So it's going to be around that, how big is the budget, and go from there. So those are the measurable things that organizations will typically look to, and maybe even belong in surveys and tie those into the ERGs and the outcomes there. However, those are not proof of concept or proof of success for an ERG. We all know the typical ERGs, right? Especially in this virtual environment. Zoom or Teams call that you attend, you sit around with your ERGs and you talk about topics you should cover, or if you want to do a newsletter to cover a specific holiday around a specific group, or there's something you want to celebrate, or the guest speaker you want to bring in, or you want to talk about what's going on in the culture and bring those in. What's the downfall with that? The downfall is that you have individuals within your ERGs that only look like you, that only have your cultural experiences, that you share similar traits and characteristics with. What you will find typically is when it's time for you to be evaluated or even promoted, a lot of the individuals that you interact with are not in your ERG groups. They, a lot of times, don't look like you, right? And so because we don't promote our ERGs and truly are intentional, because we are exclusive within our ERGs, believe it or not, we don't promote and truly are intentional about broadening our ERG membership. And I'll give you an example. If you have a Asian ERG or a Latino or Black ERG, you will find in each of those ERGs, in each bucket, you'll find that primarily only those individuals within that ethnic group or whatever it may be will attend. Now, you may have some cross-pollination here or there. For example, you'll have intersectionality within, different ERGs. You may have a Black or a white employee that identifies within the LGBTQI community, or maybe in the neurodiversity community or the disability community. So yes, of course, you'll have intersectionalities that do take place. But for the most part, our ERGs are very exclusive, and they are excluding anyone that looks different than what the majority looks like. And so what you find is that, yes, you do in some cases create safe spaces for individuals like that. However, long term, you only empower exclusivity. That's it, not inclusivity. You're encouraging your white employees and your Black employees, or your Latino or Asian or your LGBTQI, you're encouraging those individuals to be exclusive to themselves. And when it's time for evaluation and mentorship or sponsorship, because there has not been a cross-pollination that's been successfully taking place, you're running into the same exact thing. The impact of this is played out where your Black and brown employees are not being promoted. Their evaluation are still mediocre. And even when their evaluations are impressive, they're still not being promoted within your organization. To correct this, you need to put just as much emphasis on making sure that your Black and brown employees are part of that ERG. To rectify this, you need to ensure that you're putting just as much emphasis on including your non-Black and brown employees into every single ERGs that you've got. You've got to ensure that your organization promotes inclusivity in all its forms. If you've got a Black or a Hispanic or Asian, you've got to send a message that your ERGs are inclusive tribes. Everyone has a place there. Your Black and brown employees should not be isolated in their own room. And if at a certain time, everyone finds their own door and they're locked behind their door and no one enters in because they haven't been invited. You haven't demonstrated a sense of inclusivity. Your ERG membership should look like a rainbow. It should have all colors, all experiences. It should be enriched with what we call different. Your organization is different. Ensure that your groups are also different. You will honestly get the very best from that. If you're worried about safe spaces, guess what? Create safe spaces with different. That is how you will have cross-pollination. There are so many experiences that you miss out on when you don't include other minds, other thought processes, that you don't include other experiences to the table. If the only individuals who are mentors and coaches within your organizations are, let me say it a different way. If your mentorship and sponsorship leadership team comprise only of white males or white females with very little diversity, then you know this applies to you. As part of the structure that breeds for a very successful ERG, you've got to ensure that your ERG members are given the appropriate resources to ensure that they're successful. So, for example, if succession planning is part of the structure of the organization or the ERGs that we talked about, then guess what? You've got to give them the skill set to make them successful. What that may look like is doing an evaluation. Take a pulse of the human capital that you currently have internal. What are the short-term and long-term gaps within your talent that you need to account for? Once you've done an evaluation of that, okay, where is your organization heading? Well, you know where it's heading. Then the next 5 years, what talent do you need to ensure that you've got within your organization to meet that need within that market? Start there and then work yourself backwards. Where do you need to upskill and reskill? Start there within your ERGs. Use them as your test case. Upskilling and reskilling should not be an afterthought. Let it be a part of your ERG development strategy. Ensure that it aligns to the organization's long-term capital need, and you will find success there. Okay, thank you so much for joining me as we wrap up the discussion around ERG developments, both poorly and successfully, and what those two look like. I just want to say thank you for everyone who's left comment in my previous video, and also a lot of those private messages that I've been getting. I love them. I respond to every single comment and every private message. I really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for chiming in. Once again, thank you for visiting Trinice's Corner. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.